So I preached this sermonette in the follow-up to a sermon that pastor preached in the morning. So he preached a sermon on 2 Thessalonians 2, 3 through 4, which says, "Let no one deceive you in any way, for that day will not come unless the rebellion comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God." So he quotes a Bible commentator named Hendrickson, who I don't have the direct quote, but I guess I could find that out. I think Hendrickson's quote would be found in his commentary on this passage. But immediately, the pastor basically said, this is a mystery. I don't really know what this means. And he just moved on. But I think there's a little more light. And this is a pattern throughout the entire scriptures, Old and New Testament, of the church sliding off the cliff into the abyss. So this is what Jeremiah says. So God tells Jeremiah, "Stand in the gate of the Lord's house and proclaim there this word and say, hear the word of Yahweh, all you men of Judah who enter these gates to worship Yahweh. Thus says Yahweh of hosts, the God of Israel, amend your ways and your deeds, and I will let you dwell in this place. Do not trust these deceptive words. This is the temple of the Lord. The temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. For if you truly amend your ways and your deeds, if you execute justice with one another, if you do not oppress the sojourner, the fatherless, or the widow, or shed innocent blood in this place, and if you do not go after other gods to your own harm, then I will let you dwell in this place, in the land that I gave of old to your fathers forever. Behold, you trust in deceptive words to no avail. Will you steal, murder, commit adultery, swear falsely, make offerings to Baal, and go after other gods that you have not known, and then come and stand before me in this house which is called by my name and say, we are delivered, only to go on doing all these abominations? Has this house which is called by my name become a den of robbers in your eyes? Behold, I myself have seen it, declares the Lord. Go now to my place that was at Shiloh, where I made my name dwell at first, and see what I did to it because of the evil of my people Israel. And now, because you've done all these things, declares Yahweh, and when I spoke to you persistently and you didn't listen, and when I called to you and you didn't answer, therefore I will do to the house that is called by my name, in which you trust, and the place which I gave to you and your fathers as I did to Shiloh, and I will cast you out of my sight, as I cast out all your kinsmen, all the offspring of Ephraim," which is, he's referring to Israel. "As for you, do not pray for this people, or lift up a cry or prayer for them, and do not intercede with me, for I will not hear you. Do you not see that they are doing in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem? The children gather wood, the fathers kindle fire, and the women knead dough to make cakes for the Queen of Heaven, and they pour out drink offerings to other gods to provoke me to anger. Is it I whom they provoke, declares the Lord? Is it not themselves to their own shame? Therefore, thus says the Lord God, behold, my anger and my wrath will be poured out in this place upon man and beast, upon the trees of the field, the fruit of the ground, and it will burn and not be quenched. Thus says Yahweh of hosts, the God of Israel, add your burnt offerings to your sacrifices and eat the flesh. For in the day that I brought them out of the land of Egypt, I did not speak to your fathers or command them concerning burnt offerings and sacrifices. But this command I gave them, obey my voice, and I will be your God, and you shall be my people, and walk in the way that I command you, that it will be well with you. But they did not obey or incline their ear, but walked in their own counsels, and in the stubbornness of their hearts, and went backward and not forward. From the day that your fathers came out of the land of Egypt to this day, I persistently sent all my servants the prophets to them day after day. Yet they did not listen to me or incline their ear, but stiffened their neck. They did worse than their fathers. So you shall speak all these words to them, but they will not listen to you. You shall call to them, but they will not answer you. You shall say to them, this is the nation that did not obey the voice of Yahweh their God, and did not accept discipline. The truth has perished, it is cut off from their lips. Cut off your hair and cast away. Raise a lamentation on the bare heights, for Yahweh has rejected and forsaken the generation of his wrath. For the sons of Judah have done evil in my sight, declares Yahweh. They have set their detestable things in the house that is called by my name to defile it. And they have built the high places of Topeth, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to burn their sons and daughters in the fire, which I did not command, nor did it come into my mind. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, declares Yahweh, when it will no longer be called Topeth, or the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. For they will bury in Topeth, because there is no room elsewhere. And the dead bodies of this people will be food for the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and none will frighten them away. And since I silence in the cities of Judah, the cities of Jerusalem, the voice of mirth, the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom, the voice of the bride, for the land shall become a waste. So what I want to draw out of this passage is, number one, what is Jeremiah saying to the people at first? He's saying, look, you think you're safe because you are in Jerusalem, which is the city of the Lord. You think you're safe because you have a temple in it dedicated to Yahweh. But the problem is, it's only safe if you actually follow Yahweh faithfully. If you don't follow him faithfully, it becomes extremely dangerous because you are very near to the presence of God and you are making a stench before his nostrils. So that's my little interpretation of how Jeremiah is going about that. But he says, verse 22 is super important, I think, for us to hear, which is, in the day that I brought them out of the land of Egypt, I did not speak to your fathers or command them concerning burnt offerings and sacrifices. Which, what does he mean? Like the whole first 5 books of the Bible is all about, books 2 through 5 of the Bible are all about burnt offerings and sacrifices. What can God possibly be saying? Isn't he contradicting himself? The answer is no, and here's why. Because God is basically saying to the people what Jesus said to the Pharisees, which he said, you guys tithe mint and dill and cumin, and you give 10% to the poor, etc. But you've neglected the heart of the law, which is to do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with your God. You've forsaken the most important part. You should have done both of those things, but you should have done the most important part rather. So this is what God says about that. He says, obey my voice, and I will be your God, and you shall be my people, and walk in the way that I command you, and it will be well with you. So I guess, how does that apply to the church? Like, why do I think this is about us right now in this time, at least the American church? Well, I think unfortunately we've become about the accoutrements of church, like singing, preaching, getting together, getting in a building, giving tithes, etc. It's become an institution, which is fine. I think it should be in some ways, but I think when that becomes the heart of the matter rather than like actually hearing the Lord Jesus, then that's a problem. You realize, like, God set up that whole Jewish system, and then Jesus shows up, God himself, and they reject him. I feel like we're so far gone that if Jesus showed up in our churches right now and started preaching his voice, people would stone him. It's so bad. So listen, one thing I want to raise about this is when I was reading the Institutes by John Calvin, it's really incredible how he opens it up. He writes the book as an apologetic to the King of France. He dedicates the book to the King of France, and he begins the book with a systematic theology book as a defense of why Protestantism, why should we be allowed to worship as we please and reject the Catholic way. Well, he raises a whole line of argument which is incredibly powerful and unique and just like really unexpected for anyone who thinks of Calvin the way that Calvinists talk about him today. Calvin was a nobody. Think about this. Calvin, he might have had a following in Geneva. He might have had, a band of people. But as per the percentage of Europe, they are a very, very, very small minority. And so to the Roman Catholics, humanly speaking, it looks ridiculous. Calvin is coming in and saying, we've got the gospel right. You've had the gospel wrong for millennia. And so it looks ridiculous to the Roman Catholics, understandably. And so Calvin comes up with this whole line of argument, which is basically, normally, it is the visible church that persecutes the invisible. Normally, it is the visible people in power, even in quote unquote, the people of God, whether it's Jews or the church, that end up persecuting the true church. And so Calvin says this isn't a new argument. He goes back to church history, and there's a church father named Hilary, and Hilary says this: one advice I give, beware of Antichrist. By the way, he's talking to the church. Hilary is talking to believers. Beware of Antichrist, for unhappily a love of walls has seized you. Unhappily, the church of God, which you venerate, exists in houses and buildings. Unhappily, under these, you find the name of peace. Speaking of Jesus' name. Listen to this. This is super scary. We need to pay attention to this. He says, is it doubtful that in these Antichrist will have his seat? Safer to me are mountains and woods and lakes and dungeons and whirlpools, since in these prophets dwelling were immersed, did prophesy. You think about in the history of the people of Israel, what was the plight of the men who spoke God's voice, the prophets? Almost always they're on the outside and they're pointing a trembling finger at the church, at the Jews, at the kings, at the people in power. Very rarely do they have much nice to say, right? So Hilary is saying, look, now that things are getting comfy for the church in his time, you better watch out, because you can be co-opted just like the Pharisees did by the devil. I mean, Jesus says to them, your father is the devil. These are the institutions that God set up. And he says, your father is the devil. So Hilary is saying there's always a danger of Antichrist coming into even the things that God set up. So that's no safety. Hence, when Jeremiah says, do not say to yourself, this is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. You can't just say, hey, we're going to church, we're taking communion, we're doing all these things. You can never rest in those things. Your only rest is following God faithfully. That's the only rest you have. You can't rest in the institution of the church, period. And I think Hilary is right. I think Hilary is saying, look, listen, I'm just going to quote him verbatim. He says, is it doubtful that in these Antichrist will have his seat? Now, let's go back to the passage that the pastor was talking earlier, which is 2 Thessalonians, I think it's 2 through 3. It says this. Listen to what 2 Thessalonians says. Starting verse 3, 2 Thessalonians 2. All right. Let no one deceive you in any way, for that day will not come unless what? The rebellion or apostasy comes first. Of whom? Who's the rebellion coming from? I mean, it's not unbelievers. This is believers. The rebellion comes, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that what? He takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. What's the temple of God? Is there a temple to Yahweh right now? Question. Is there a temple to Yahweh right now? Well, the Jewish temple is cast down. There's basically a wall left. A lot of dispensationalists think there has to be a physical Jewish temple rebuilt in order for this to happen. But the problem is that's not what the New Testament says is the temple of God. This says his seat in the temple of God. Notice the connection. Verse 3, it says the rebellion's coming. So in other words, there's a falling away. Look, now verse 4, he's taking his seat in the temple of God. I think this means that the visible church, not the invisible church, no one can be snatched from Jesus' hand, but the visible church is going to be the seat of the Antichrist. I think Antichrist is going to take up the visible church, and he's going to sit down. He's going to use them as his most faithful minions. And remember, if this sounds ridiculous, look, there's even a warning about this in Romans 11. If you think this is crazy, listen to Romans 11. Romans 11, Paul says the exact same thing. He says, let's see, Romans 11, he says, Okay, Romans 11 verses 17. So it says, but if some of the branches were broken off, he's speaking of the Jews as the branches that are broken off, and you, speaking to Gentiles, although a wild olive shoot, were grafted in among the others and now share in the nourishing root of the olive tree. Verse 18, listen very closely. Do not be arrogant toward the branches. Do not be arrogant toward the Jews. Listen, if you are, remember, it's not you who support the root, but the root that supports you. Verse 19, then you will say, branches were broken off so that I might be grafted in. That's true. They were broken off because of their unbelief. But you stand fast through faith. Do not become proud, but fear. For if God did not spare the natural branches, neither will he spare you. Whoa. Hold on. He can never forsake us. He will never leave us nor forsake. Well, he'll never leave or forsake those who are following him faithfully. He didn't leave or forsake the Jews who were following him faithfully, but he forsook the institution system thing that was set up. He forsook the visible manifestation of it. The system. He forsook the system, that's for sure. But he never makes a promise to a system. He makes his promise to those who are faithful. So I'm going to read it again. If God did not spare, verse 21, Romans 11:21, if God did not spare the natural branches, neither will he spare you. So if that sounds ridiculous that God would ever forsake the visible manifestation of the people of God, well, there's not much I can say to that other than I don't think that person is listening. So I'm going to quote Calvin again, Calvin for the first time. Let us reverently admit that as God alone knows who are his, so he may sometimes withdraw from the external manifestation of his church from the view of men. I mean, the Protestants were so emphatic that the Roman Catholics were antichrist. Why were they antichrist? Did they start out as antichrist? No. It was a drift. And Protestantism in itself as a system is not safe from that same fate. So listen to this. This I allow is a fearful punishment which God sends on the earth. But if the wickedness of men so deserves, why do we strive to oppose the just vengeance of God? So here's what I would say as far as the lesson that we need to take from this is, number one, we need to remember that there is no safety in simply being a member of a church or being Christian. You need to walk by faith. You need to walk by faith. If you're walking by the flesh, remember what Paul says in Romans 8, you will die. If you walk by the flesh, you will die. If you walk by the Spirit, you'll have life. So I think the problem is 99.99999% of the church is indeed walking by the flesh, and there's just no safety there.